This podcast is produced by Blue Moggy Media. Hello and welcome to the Blue Moggy Podcast. My name is Rachel Stevens. I am a writer, director, producer and all-around filmmaker, and on this show I talk to people who work within film and media, breaking down what their job is, how they started, how their career progressed, sharing some behind the scenes of projects and productions that they work on, as well as sharing tips and advice to you guys listening in case you are interested in following down a similar career. Before we get into talking about today's guest, I just want to apologise about the unscheduled break in the releases of the episodes. This episode was actually recorded in April and was meant to have been released middle towards the end of April. But, you know, sometimes life gets in the way and that's what happened. There was a lot going on and sometimes something has to give. And unfortunately, in this case, it was the podcast. But we are back on and here is the episode today. And the next episode of the podcast has already been recorded and that should be released in 2 weeks today. And we're going to try and stick to the release schedule of every other, should have been Wednesday, but this is coming out on a Thursday, every other week. But it may be in some cases there's one, if we can do 1 or 2 episodes a month, then I'll be happy. And that is what we'll be working towards. As I've said in episodes so far, but I'll say it again in case this is the first episode you're listening to. If there is a particular guest, not necessarily an individual, but a job that someone who works in a specific job that you want to hear from, or someone who works in a particular department, if there's anything in particular that you want to hear from on this podcast, please reach out to us via our social media at Blue Moggy Media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or go to our website or comment wherever you're listening to this episode if there is the option to do that. I'll try to make sure we have a variety of different guests. Like if we've heard from a director, then we won't hear from a director the next week. I'll try and spread that out, but it'll be good to know if there is something that you who are listening to want to hear from, then I can bump that up and try and make that happen sooner rather than later. It also doesn't have to be just film and TV. If you want to hear from someone who makes video games or documentaries or is making visual art, so artist moving image, digital art, if you think it fits or even loosely fits, then I'm open to hearing your suggestions and making that happen for you. And if this is the first episode you're joining us on, firstly, welcome. And please go back and check out the other episodes that have been released so far. Make sure you subscribe so you'll get release notifications. Like I say, there is another episode already recorded and that should be coming out in a couple weeks' time. My guest for this episode was Glen Jevon, who is a director of photography, a stills photographer, a camera operator, does a lot of work for bands, for stills and video. He's also a musician, as you'll hear us mention at the beginning of the episode. Is quite a talented man. We probably could have talked about a number of things, but we mostly focused on, as well as his career from the beginning to where he is now, mostly focused on shooting music videos and sort of the differences between stills photography and shooting video. And I've known Glen for a long time, and I found it a really interesting conversation to hear his story, and hopefully you will find it interesting too. And with that said, I don't think there's anything left to do but play the episode. Glen Jevon, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. We're going to talk a little bit about being a DOP and a photographer, but I know that you have many skills, multi-talented man. So you're a musician?
Yes.
You're a synth player, is that right?
Yeah. Mainly, I'm a multi-instrumentalist, I think we're called.
Multi-instrumentalist.
Pretty much everything apart from drums. I'm not very good. I can't multitask, you see, so drums are too multitasking for me.
You're also an editor?
Yeah.
Adobe accredited?
Yes.
educator,
Yeah, you've been on my website.
teacher. Yeah, I just know you from
Yeah,
a long time.
we've known each other quite a while now.
Yeah, you've experienced in film education as well.
Yes, yeah, taught for many years.
Yeah. Anything I missed?
That's pretty much it. Yeah,
Do you
and it kind of all relates to each other as well.
Yeah,
what you just
some
said, so.
more like technical stuff. Do you do any sort of writing, directing, creative side?
No, I leave that for the people who are much better at that than me. So yeah, anything with a lens is basically kind of comes into my domain.
Okay.
And I, as you say, I do edit as well, but it's a little bit under duress. I prefer being, camera in hand.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's what we'll focus on today. Like I said, we could have talked about anything, but we'll be here for a long time. But I wanted to talk to you about sort of the camera side of things, because I haven't really spoken to anyone about that yet on the podcast. So, where, in terms of your like love for using cameras and stuff, where did that start for you?
Okay, so yeah, that goes back quite a long while, all the way back to sixth form, which, well, what was that, 96 or something? I'm quite old. And I was doing my art. So I didn't do A levels. I went off and went to a separate place and did like HNDs and diplomas and things.
Right.
Because I thought that would be a better chance of getting a job prospects at the end of it. And now, funnily enough, that seems to be how a lot of things work. A lot of people tend to do diplomas and things instead. But anyway, I went off to do a general art and design diploma, and so I specialised, funnily enough, in graphic design. But one of the units in my second year was film and video. And no one else kind of really took to it, but I just discovered this, like, oh my God, I absolutely love this. To the extent where my dad kind of went, oh yeah, that's pretty cool as well. Went out and bought like a Video 8 camera, and we joined like a local camera club as well. So I was doing it at the weekends with my dad as well, which is like, a nice little bonding thing. And that culminated in, funny enough, I just mentioned off air before we started, I did my final project was a stop motion animation, and then I had a sort of cine transfer to VHS at the end of it for the display, which someone managed to record Coronation Street over halfway through the final exhibition. Digressing, but that was it. From that moment on, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to work with cameras and things.
Yeah. So what was your next steps after that?
So straight after that, obviously I went on to uni, and I got about it wasn't even that long, maybe 3 weeks into the course, I went, this isn't the right course. I won't go into the details of why, but it was more of an art course than this is how to be a cameraman course, of which there's millions now, but there wasn't many of those courses around. And in amongst all that, I got offered a job. So I was helping out in a local edit suite as well. And they used to film the BBC Learning Zone programmes, and anyone else in kind of my generation will remember those from when they were growing up. The BBC used to put educational programmes out in the middle of the night. And the idea was you set your video recorder at 2 till 2:30 in the morning and recorded like a modern languages program that you could play in class or learn from. And the place I was with made those modern language programs, and I was helping out on that. Long story short, the cameraman didn't make it to one of the shoots. I stood in, and they offered me a job. So I dropped out of uni and became a cameraman basically sort of straight away. So
that was with BBC?
That was for the BBC. Yes.
Okay.
So it was being made on behalf of the BBC Learning Zone. So it wasn't the most professional production. It wouldn't pass, EBU standards these days. But it did the job, and it was a big multi-camera setup. There was lots of editing involved afterwards. It was a great way of getting into that world, and this is how you do it. These are the ratios you shoot. This is how you edit. Obviously, we didn't have to worry about commercial breaks because it was the BBC, but that came later. But it was a great intro at the age of, what was I, sort of 18, 19 then, of how to make something broadcastable rather than just watchable. It's because that's two different things.
Yeah. Okay. And then, so I know now you do a lot of music videos and stuff. Did that come kind of much later? Or?
So I'll kind of take you through I'll try and keep it as brief as I can, but a bit of a timeline to today from that moment. So the company I was with doing those, one of the guys I was working with was a guy called Andy, who literally became best mate quite early on. We just kind of clicked. He's still probably my best mate in the world today. He's godfather to my kids, you know, that kind of thing. One of the things he did on the side was he'd go to festivals in the summer with cameras and do feeds for the big screens and all that kind of thing. Multi-cameras, big screens, people watching in the crowd, bands on screen. And so obviously I got involved in that quite quickly as well. So every summer we'd just go off for the entire summer. The company we were with, bless their hearts, was so good. They just lent us all the kit. It's fine, didn't cost us a penny. We didn't get paid for doing it either. We just did it for free tickets to festivals, basically. But that was just brilliant. Just watching all these bands, filming them, putting them on the screen. Can I digress quickly into my most embarrassing moment?
Go for it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the most embarrassing moment in my life was at one of those festivals where I was on stage with a band called Midnight Oil, which some people may recognise as well. They were quite big in the 90s and early 2000s, and they were playing away. I was on the stage with a camera, getting this wonderful shot down the bass player's neck of his guitar as he's playing this big intro. And cut a long story short, he finished his little solo-y bit, turned to walk back down the stage and clipped me on the side of the camera because I was that close to his headstock. So, you know, nothing sort of big or anything, just tapped it, but I just politely stepped out of the way because I didn't want to get in his way or anything, and I stepped into open space. I missed them, fell off the stage basically. In front of about 32,000 people.
Oh no.
And in those days cameras weren't wireless, they were wired with big thick you know, sort of pins like that. So for the people listening at home, I'm holding my hand up the size of an egg, size connectors, and you had cable pullers so you didn't trip over the cable. So I fell off the stage, and about 3 seconds later Fran, my cable puller, fell on top of me because I pulled her off the stage as well. And 32,000 people laughed at me, and my shot was on screen at the time as well, so it just went sky. Anyway.
At least if it happened now, though, there would have been 30,000 people filming it on their phones.
Absolutely, viral moments. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, so after that, we did all sorts of things, came off the back of that, just volunteering at festivals and things, and we actually ended up doing a lot of live videos for quite well-known bands back in the sort of 90s. I mean, I'm talking like U2, REM, Moby, you know, not sort of studio shot stuff, just when they were doing live, we'd provide content, you know, ended up on DVDs and things when he bought the band. Worked quite closely with a guy called Pete Williams, or Willie Williams is known in the industry. He was like the set designer for U2, but he was also responsible for all that sort of island Universal type video content as well. So I just kind of really fell into that world. And as you mentioned before, I'm a musician as well, so music and video is kind of like my two great loves. So when I can marry those together, that's kind of as good as it gets, really. So, and after that, I kind of went into mainstream TV. I'll keep this kind of quite short, but I kind of worked my way down the EPG. So I did some stuff with BBC Northwest, and then moved down here and did some stuff with BBC South. My goal was I always wanted to work for the BBC. It was just all I ever wanted to do. And when I finally did it, I lasted about 9 months. Sorry, BBC, but I didn't enjoy it. There's too much paperwork. And
do you think BBC was your goal because it was the broadcast?
Absolutely.
So like now people might be like Netflix. I want to work for Netflix.
Yeah, BBC was the global leader in entertainment. If you work for the BBC, it was like real, you know, status, you know, kind of thing. So I defected quite quickly to ITV, and then did some stuff for Channel 4, and then Channel 5. Literally worked my way down the EPG and ended up sort of doing stuff with Sky Sports and things like that, and then ended up head of broadcast for some Sky Digital channels when everything went digital. So that was my kind of TV career in a very, very short nutshell. Then went freelance in, when would that be? 2005, 2006, somewhere around then. I started working for myself rather than other people. Yeah.
And so the work for yourself, we talked about music videos, but I know you do a lot of like wedding photography, so you have like a photographer side as well.
Yes, yeah. So I do a lot of photography as well as video, and again, that kind of, everything in my life seemed to happen by accident. So that also happened by accident. We were covering a show, and on the morning of the show, the guy running the sort of content team said to me, "Can you take photographs today? We haven't got a photographer." And I was like, I've never taken a photograph in my life, apart from like, my art degree at sixth form. I'm a cameraman sort of thing. He was like, I know you are, but we got 5 of you and no photographer. So here's a camera. Can you go and take some photos? So I did, and I absolutely loved it. And I knew what I was doing because it was just, ISO, aperture, shutter speeds. It was just, it was all somehow familiar. And then you got these like beautiful images at the end of it. And I was like, oh, I like this. So I literally went out and bought myself a camera, and kind of the rest is history. So yeah, I'd do weddings. Most of my photography work is, again, music based. So I'll do album covers, gig shoots, festivals, that kind of stuff as well.
You mentioned that, like, obviously, like the technical side of taking a photo and filming something is the same. What do you think the differences are between
yes. So the science is the same.
Yeah.
So obviously you've got your ISO, which is your gain on video, and your shutter speed and your aperture is completely the same. There's more rules to video. For sure. Certainly if you want to make something broadcastable as well, you have to keep within certain parameters. In the UK, you really want to be shooting with shutter speeds that are multiples of 50, so you don't get phasing, things like that, and any sort of moire, Bayer matrixing and things going into colour science, stuff you get away with on a still image. You really have to kind of get right on video. You don't want to be submitting something to Sky, for instance, that's got any sub-blacks in the image, because sub-blacks, I don't know if they still do, but back when I was doing it, they could crash people's skyboxes.
Really?
So yeah, you'll find that things like Avid and Premiere things. You can buy legalizer plugins, which again weren't really around when I was doing it, so you had to get it right in the edit. That will run your footage through and just make sure it's all broadcast legal and stuff like that. And obviously you don't get that with still photography. Yeah. And you can use flashes and things with still photography, which you can't really use in video. You have to do it with continuous lighting, which generally isn't quite as intense and dramatic.
Do you frame differently when you're doing stills, or mostly the same?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, I guess you do. I mean, the rules still apply, but you've got your rules of thirds that everyone knows, and then you come into your proxemics and things like using the edges of the frame to describe stuff. You obviously, with a still image, you have to get it right in that single frame and give what you mean to say to the viewer in that one moment, whereas video, you can lead that in. So if you're making a horror or something, then all of a sudden, like, someone's a bit not proxemic, is that a word? It is now, to the side, and there's quite a big space in the frame there. That actually probably something's going to appear in that space in a shot or two, but you've got time to kind of lead the viewer in with video. So yeah, it's a kind of a different approach, but the science and the rules and the aesthetics, I suppose, are still the same.
When you're like shooting music videos, for example, do you have a particular style, or is that something you're working out with the client?
I suppose I do, in a way. I have a lot of go-to shots, go-to lighting states and things that work well with, what will work for one client won't work for another, but you generally have to work within their style. If they're a rapper, it's going to be fast-paced edits, sped up footage, all that kind of stuff. And for a acoustic singer-songwriter with floaty dresses and floaty hair, then you'll shoot in a completely different style. But also a lot of it depends on budgets as well. Like I say, back in the 90s, I used to work with some really big bands and big budgets and things. But these days, I tend to concentrate more on people who've just been signed or just got a record deal or something. So they haven't made it yet, but they're on their way, and they need to be putting stuff up on YouTube or Vivo or something that will stand up next to the big music videos. But they haven't got £30,000 or whatever. They might have £1,000. They might even have £500. You know what I mean? But they need something that doesn't look like it was shot by their mate on an iPhone sort of thing. So, and that's kind of where I tend to specialise now, because they're just so much fun, basically. And we can knock quite a few out a year of those. And also working within budgets is actually a lovely challenge in itself as well. Is how can we achieve what you want to achieve without hiring a crew and sky panels and rigs and cranes and things like that. And so I kind of quite get off on the challenge of that
Yeah.
as well. But to go back to your original question, which I've waffled so much I've completely forgotten it was. Oh yeah, do I have a style? Yeah, there's also bands that don't really know what they want, or they want something. Oh yeah, I saw this video, you did like this. Can we have something like that? And some of those are almost templated. You know, each shoot is unique, but we'll go, okay, well, we'll do, you know, 6 different locations. We'll do 3 costume changes. We'll have this lighting state and this lighting state, maybe a white background, maybe a black background, you know, so it's almost templated to that extent, but we'll always try and, you know, put some kind of little twist on it or do something different that we haven't done before, just because it keeps it fresh, keeps it fun. I get bored really easily. I like every day being really different, which is probably why, as you said earlier, I do so many different things.
No, I get that. I was just thinking, like, the types of music, like the music videos that stick in my mind, or like the sort of like iconic ones, they're the ones that stand out. Usually the ones that have like a story to them, or they stand out for whatever reason. But a lot of music videos are just a few locations, different costume changes, the singer looking into the camera. Yeah,
absolutely. That's absolutely true. That's a really good point as well. It's like and obviously, as you mentioned, some music videos have narrative, and again, that's quite an important budget decision, because as soon as you get narrative and actors involved, the costs go up. So if you are just a breaking or aspiring musician, there's narrative videos are great, but if they're done badly and you've got your mates acting and stuff, it's like it's worse than not having narrative, if that makes sense. So if you're going to have narrative, get an actor in, you know, get a model in or whatever as well, and kind of do it properly is probably kind of a really big tip, because it shows if you know the people don't know what they're doing or can't pull it off or be believable. Then maybe just stick to a performance video with some pretty shots as well. But otherwise, you know, get people involved. And you know, I'm not one of these, like, you know, you should refuse to work for free, you know, kind of thing. I'm not saying you should always like do things for free, but you'll find that people will do things for a budget or even for free. Even I'll still work for free on occasion if it's a project I really like the sound of, I really want to be involved with, or just help someone out. It's absolutely fine. So always ask. You know, if people, you know, if you've got a friend who is an actor or something, say, look, I really can't pay you, but I'll buy you dinner, or you know, maybe 50 quid or something, then you'll probably find, you know, no one will be mind if you ask. If you assume people work for free, then that's not a good thing. But they're always worth an ask. And again, I digress from the original question.
I've not worked on many music videos myself, but I did, I can't remember, it was probably quite a few years ago now.
I remember the parody one.
So I was the producer, so the filmmaker, the director was Rakesh Find. He asked me to produce it. The band was called Dance Macabre.
That's right.
And the song was Jamaica Inn, so inspired by the
actual Jamaica Inn,
the actual place and the story. And it was a 2-day shoot, 4 locations, something like 20 extras. And I was the producer. And we started outside on the beach, and it was like she'd been like washed up in like this chest. So we had like this exterior location on the beach with all these extras. We had a church. We managed to get a church scene, and then we also had one. We had to make like the inside of the chest, so we literally did that in someone's garage.
Okay.
And we sort of like kind of took some sides out, so we like had her like in the corner, and then I was literally above her with a watering can trying to like get the water to come in. And then we had the last part was an actual like studio, so it was like a local college.
That's
in
right.
their dance studio.
So I mean, shoots like that, they're great, aren't they, when you have a big crew and they just take on an energy of their own as well. And you know, you can storyboard to your heart's content, but there'll always be stuff on the day like, oh, let's do this, let's do that. And you know, sometimes the song and the video itself take you on a journey rather than you telling that journey, and I just love that. I really get off on that kind of stuff.
One of the things I remember about it when we were in the studio, which was the last bit,
So we're doing all this stuff with like the band and then the singer separately, and the director had an idea to like project some footage of the original Hitchcock Jamaica Inn film. And everyone was like, "Oh, we're running out of time," And then I think I just sent everyone else out and was just like, "I just need you, the singer, and the camera person," and we got it on, and it looks so cool now, that shot. So she's singing to the camera, but it's being projected like onto her and behind her, and it just led to like tie in those influences of the song and the video. That was really cool.
So I've played with projection in a few music videos, and it's one of those things that sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I did one fairly recently where we did that as well, and we had maybe 10 different projections, and I think one of them I was happy with. It was not a good ratio anyway. But one, I do remember one where I really liked, where we literally sat a guy in a black room on an office chair, single light from the side, and just someone laid on the floor, and just we filmed him and just slowly rotated his chair, so he was just rotating in place. And then the song itself was the exact same lighting setup, exact same framing, exact same focal length, and he was just staring into camera, singing along to the song while we projected his own face onto his face, but it was rotating, and it was just so visually disturbing. But it was just brilliant. I've never really kind of matched that again. It was just perfect for the song. It was kind of quite a sort of dark synth poppy kind of 80s style song, and it just worked so well. I must bring that back out of the closet actually and do that again. That was such a good idea.
I was thinking when you were talking earlier about, I don't know if you know the music video, it was Blink-182. I think the song was Always, and it's I think that's the right one, but the music video is so there's 3 band members in Blink-182, and the video's cut in 3.
Okay.
But all three of them like playing out the same scene, but from each of their different perspective, but it's also backwards and in three sections. I'm sure it was that song.
What a headache. Yeah.
But I remember watching that.
I have to go up and watch that. I
remember watching that over and over again. To film that. They had to film it 3 different times first of all, because there were 3 actors, and work out how to play it like shooting something backwards,
It's absolutely insane.
Hello, this is Rachel from The Edit, just jumping in for a second, listening to previous me from 2 months ago. Sounds like I've slightly misremembered or jumbled up 2 music videos here. Always by Blink-182 is definitely the music video that is split into 3 sections with the different band members playing out the same scene, and if you watch it, you'll see it spinning. It's not backwards though, and this is currently annoying current me, because I know that there is a backwards music video. I'm guessing it's from the same era of Blink-182, so American sort of pop punky, maybe Sum 41, Jimmy Eat World. If anyone knows what it is that I'm mixing up, it could be another Blink-182 video. If you know of or think you know what music video it is that I was referring to, please let me know, because it is quite annoying. I've decided to leave my mistake in because I liked where the conversation went with Glenn after this moment. So anyway, back to the episode.
Yeah.
Have you done any backwards music videos? That sounds like a pain.
Do you know what? Not entirely. Do you know, there's been some music videos where we've used a little bit of backwards elements, like people walking along the beach. So it's not overly obvious.
Yeah.
People always look a little bit like they're walking backwards when they're walking backwards, and then you play it the other way. But it's more the waves were going backwards, so it was kind of quite a subtle thing.
Right.
And it was about, the song itself was kind of about journeying back into, sort of remembering and nostalgia and that kind of thing. So it kind of worked in that. We're not doing any, the eggs are flying up from the floor or anything too weird.
I guess like Coldplay Yellow would probably be like the biggest backwards music video that I can think of.
No, they are really good. What I do use a lot is sort of time dilation things, whereas I'll take the song and I'll make a a version of it that's 30% speed, so it's really like that. And then I'll also take the same song and make it 300% speed, so and then you make the singer, bless their hearts, try and sing along to that. I remember doing one. There's an absolutely wonderful singer-songwriter called Nina Schofield, who's she's just absolutely brilliant. And we did a song for her, I think it was called Restart, where we did both those techniques. And bless her heart, I think we shot in February, and it was actually quite local. It was in New Forest, I think, and it was about -1 degrees. And I made her do this 30% speed take, which I think took around 13 and a half minutes to get through the entire song because it was so slow. And bless her, she was freezing. So it was a kind of like medium close-up shot, and like literally just out of camera frame, she was wrapped up in blankets and towels and things because it was just so cold. Bless her heart, complete pro, looked into the camera the whole time, nailed it perfectly. And then I made her do it at like chipmunk speed as well. And then when you re-speed those up to normal sort of sped footage, the effect is just wonderful. It goes from real floaty, ethereal, dreamy to kind of real glitchy kind of sped up stuff, but somehow they're singing at the right speed, and I love playing with those kind of time effects.
So you shoot it slower or faster, but then when you're editing
you can
put it...
do both, but it's easier to kind of shoot it kind of normal speed, but at a high kind of frame rate, so you can split it. But yeah, you can like shoot it at 200 frames per second, but you get other issues then as well. But you can kind of shoot it normally as long as you've got the song slowed down or sped up, and then speed it or slow it back down in the footage. For anyone who's kind of doing this with cameras that don't do 200, 400 frames per second, you can shoot it normally and then just like interplay in the edit suite or something. I think the Restart one we shot everything at 50 frames per second. That's kind of my go-to, really, 50 frames. I use that an awful lot because even when you're watching it at 25, there's just a smoothness to it. And then if you just want to slow something down half speed, decision you're making in the edit rather than in the pre-production, it's still running at 25 or whatever you're watching it on. Sorry for people listening in America, it's like we use 25 and 50 over here, not 29.97. What's that all about?
And so also we're talking about digital cameras at the moment, but obviously because you've been doing it for a while.
Yes,
you've used probably quite a few different types of cameras.
I've gone through quite a few, yeah. I mean, what did I start? My first cameras would have been Super VHS, I think Panasonic M5s. What was an AG450? That was the edit suite, wasn't it? Yeah, things like Panasonic M5s were the first cameras. In fact, that's what we used to shoot the BBC Learning Zone stuff on, was Super VHS. It's like, crikey, it's like even a £30 mobile phone will shoot better quality pictures now. But they were quite expensive in their day, and obviously we had linear edit suites as well, so you'd have like sort of 2 playback machines, a little edit controller, and then a record machine. You'd cue things up. You still do in and out points and things, then just set it going and then record it onto the tape. And we also had one of the very first non-linear edit suites, which was called a fast video machine, which was just incredible technology at the time. No one had done that before. We got one of the first ones where you could actually digitize your tapes, digitize your footage, edit it in a non-linear fashion, and then it would record it out to tape at the end. But they were so expensive. I can't even begin to imagine. I think we had like sort of a 32, no, it wasn't even that, maybe a 6 gigabyte hard drive or something, which cost like tens of thousands of pounds. It was just absolutely ridiculous. But then after that, it actually came later. I went on to sort of teaching film and TV production at degree level, and the cameras that the students used in the first year were, oh God, remember model numbers. I think it was a Sony VX3000, which is like a 1971 TV camera, sort of tube-based camera. And I thought, crikey, this like stuff's 10 years older than I am, sort of thing. Why are they training students on it? And it quickly became apparent the reason they were training students on it, because it was so raw, so like you have to get this right. Everything was manual, not even an automated zoom. It was a manual zoom, manual focus, manual iris, everything. And if the students could get that right, then they could use any camera, literally, that was made since. It was actually a genius idea, but it was kind of really weird using kit. You know, these things used to like umbilical down to a U-matic recorder. You know, that was, I don't know, the size of a large briefcase you had to carry around on your shoulder at the same time. And then, technology just marched on so fast after that. I remember when I was working for Sky, I can't remember the rates, but say you got £250 a day if you were just running camera for them. If you had your own kit, you got like £500 a day. It was like double the rate because cameras were so expensive then, like Digibeta and things like that. I remember the first camera kit I got, so camera, tripod, lens, set of redheads or whatever, I think it was about £90,000, I think.
Wow.
So it was literally like mortgage to get it. In fact, I think it was more than my mortgage at the time. But actually sold it on a few years later for pretty much the same price. So it was kind of cost neutral at the end. And now you can get, you know, like here, we're in City Eye today recording this podcast. They got their FX9, which is about 12 grand or something. Absolutely cinema level camera. It's like, so cameras do sound expensive, but actually they're not these days. They're so cheap compared to what they used to be. And the quality is just insane. The Black Magic range, for instance, little pocket cameras and things like that, they are so cheap and the results are so good if you know what you're doing with them.
Well, I know, I won't go too much about City Eye history, but I know how City Eye started 30-something, 37 years ago, was some filmmakers in the area in Southampton came together as a collective because they couldn't all afford these individual kit, but as a collective they could, and they could share it and they could do stuff in the community, and that's sort of like the very, very early stages of what would become City Eye where we are now.
Yeah, it was so expensive. Actually, we mentioned it off air earlier. I've just fixed a 1983 camcorder, which I'm very chuffed with myself about. I'm going to use it. It was going to be a prop in a music video, but now I've actually managed to get it working. I'm actually going to shoot the music video on it. But that was a 1983 VideoStar 3V50, I think the model is, and it was one of the very first, if not the first, consumer level video camera that someone could go into Dixon's in the day or Tandy's or whatever and actually buy. And if anyone's watched Stranger Things, like the season 1 of Stranger Things, Dusty's camcorder, the little red thing, it's the same camera. That's a JVC GRC. Sorry, I'm a geek for my model numbers. GRC1, I think. They're using that, but the Ferguson video cell was actually the exact same camera because JVC and Ferguson were the same company. Ferguson was just like the sort of pro end stuff like that, so they'd sell those to universities rather than consumers, basically. That was, I think, probably around £1,000 in 1983, and I dread to think what that is in today's money. What, £3,000? Probably more. I don't know how much that's gone up, but it was a significant investment for the person off the street in those days. It was an awful lot of money, but people bought them. And I bought mine for £12.50 on eBay. Yay!
Yeah, you made a TikTok. You had to make a new sort of battery source.
I did, yes, yeah. So actually, the camera was bought as spares and repairs. Like I say, it was just going to be a prop in an upcoming music video. But when it arrived, it was in such good nick. It came in the case. There's some blank tapes in there. There's cables that came with it, which were still wrapped up. It's absolutely pristine, but obviously it didn't work. But there wasn't an awful lot wrong with it. It was literally the internal fuse in the power bank. I'm not sure why it blew. It could just be because it was 40 years old, but I've replaced it and it works, so hopefully it's not going to blow again. And the battery, obviously a 40-year-old battery wasn't going to ever work. But it was a 9.6 volt battery. Remote control cars take 4.8 volt batteries, so I got two of those, wired them up in parallel. They fitted inside the case of the original battery, and it worked. So I'd like to say it was because I was genius, but it was more of a fluke, to be fair. But
and you're going to shoot on that camera.
Yeah, flicked the switch, and it all powered up, worked perfectly. Gave the heads a clean because I didn't know how long it'd been sitting there, and it just recorded to tape absolutely perfectly. Didn't even need to adjust the tracking, for anyone who remembers adjusting tracking back in the day. It's perfect. So I'm actually going to shoot an upcoming music video. It'll be later this year. There's no date yet. And the song's called Obsession, and it's about a stalker. So the guy in the video is going to be basically filming this singer, you know, covertly and also at gigs and things with his camera, you know, for his own pleasure. But now I'm actually going to just give him a fake dummy camera and shoot the video, because it's a very 80s song. So we're going to shoot it on an 80s camera, which will just be such a great thing to do.
Well, people are starting to do things like that now. I don't know if you've seen the film Mid-90s.
Oh, I haven't seen it. Yes,
it was Jonah Hill's directorial debut,
right?
But because of the time of the film and the sort of the context of the characters would be using like handheld video cameras, they shot it on video as well, and it's in 4:3. And no, I love it. It's like, you know, every app you get now has got some kind of VHS filter or something, but they never get it quite right. It still doesn't look right. There was, again, you were talking about the rules of shooting video earlier. It's like one of the rules when you shot on VHS is never film anything red if you can help it, because red just bled out of its channel. You'd never have red text. You watch any sort of anything from like 1980 to, you know, mid-90s that would either have been shot on VHS or ended up on VHS. You'll never see a red title or a caption because it just blurred. So your filters on your apps and things, well, they'll do chromatic aberrations, they're called, when the colours kind of split off. They'll do that, but you know, the red, the green and the blue will all go the same amount. It never went the same amount. Red was off the chart, you know, just stuff like that. You can't kind of replicate that with a filter. So just looking at the footage I've already shot on this camera, it just looks, oh God, it takes me back. It makes me sound really old, doesn't it? But, you know, that stuff was old when I was young. So, but. Do you like shooting digital now? Because I guess it's a lot more convenient and quicker.
Absolutely, yeah. It's the same way as like, I shot photos on film when I was doing my diplomas and things, and it was. Oh, it's hideous. It was great. It was really nice, like watching film develop, for instance. But I'd never shoot a wedding on a film camera. And apologies to those people that do. You're much cleverer than me. But just the thought of, you know, you'd wind your negatives onto the reel. You'd put them in the developer and the fixer and the bleach fix and all that kind of stuff. And then you'd get them out of the drying cabinet. You'd find there was a bit where the negative had just touched another bit of the negative, and there's a big spot on your film. So I love the fact that you don't have that anymore. You know, you can just take a picture. You can look back at it there and then if you want, and you know it's come out. That's a great thing as well. But also stuff like there was a point where digital got better than analog, and I use better in air quotes there, because, you know, again, some people really like the aesthetics of analog and stuff as well. But where the resolution got greater, the color depth got greater. I mean, the colors we're talking now that can be captured on some cameras these days. It's, you know, 8-bit, 16-bit, 24-bit, even 48-bit cameras. It's just absolutely insane, that kind of depth. And when you're shooting at that kind of resolution and that kind of depth, the stuff you can get out of that footage is absolutely earth-shatteringly amazing. So yeah, I really do like shooting digital now, because it just gives you a lot more scope to do things, you know, to really push and pull that picture around and do things to it which you couldn't do on any other format.
Yeah. And for that reason, as we were talking about like the beginnings of City Eye, I guess digital, if anyone's getting into it now, it's so much more accessible.
Absolutely.
It's more affordable. It's easier to carry around.
Yeah.
So I know you do a lot of teaching. Are you teaching people on digital, I guess?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And so, right back until the degree course, which was the last time I taught anyone on analog, I think. But yeah, it's like everyone now has a broadcast level camera in their pocket, which is just absolutely insane. You know, when's the last time you saw someone with a compact camera? You know, it just doesn't happen anymore. In fact, I joke because on like really big shoots, I'll hire cameras in, but obviously I've got some cameras and kit myself. But I always joke that I've got 2 HDR cameras. You know, one's my cinema camera, which is like a big full kitted out thing, and one's my iPhone, which is just insane. As you've got a HDR, you know, camera in your pocket now. So,
Yeah.
and HDR is a really, really big thing. I think it's much bigger than the 4K introduction. I think HDR is a bigger leap in technology. Yeah, it's really changed the pictures you see.
Yeah. So a camera set up, say for a music video, is it just you and one camera, or do you do multiple cameras?
Completely depends on the music video. If it's like, a lot of bands want. Well, I'm trying to think. There's different ways of they approach it. Some of them will say, we want our gig filmed. We've got this gig and we want it filmed, and that's absolutely fine. We'll do that. Some will say, we want a gig film to make a promo. They don't actually want a gig film. They want a promo. So it's like as at a gig, but don't get the two confused. You can't, you see those like real glossy promo videos for bands where the cameras are sweeping around and it's beautifully lit and everything. It looks like they're at a gig, but they're not really at a gig. You won't get that at a gig. So, if you want that kind of video, that's one kind of video. If you want just a record of this gig with decent cameras, decent lighting and decent sound, that's a very different thing as well. So as live stuff, we could use, big crews, lots of cameras and kind of things. For an actual shot, scripted, storyboarded music video, it's generally just me. There has been occasions where there's extra, cameras and stuff like that. But when you're stopping and starting, taking a shot, it's easy enough to do it single camera most of the time. And obviously the smaller the crew, the cheaper the cost of the video. So most people tend to go for that. But there's no real rule to that at all. But it's generally me with depends how many cameras. I could turn up with 5 or 6 different cameras and 12, 13 different lenses for depending on what we're doing. So it's the one downside to that is that I have an awful lot of kit that then I have to carry. So
do you have a preference with the type of camera that you use of the ones you've got, or is it just depending?
Good question again. It's the camera has to fit what you're shooting. So again, not the 80s music video is a great example. So we're going to use an 80s camera, but it's not normally quite as black and white as that. If they want a kind of studio look, we could use some kind of cameras. If they want a very cinematic look, we could use a different set of cameras and lenses. There's all, drones, GoPros and things all play their part as well, depending on the shoot. So the camera has to fit the brief for the shoot, but the camera also has to fit the budget for the shoot. Not everyone can afford, a camera hire to get some sort of, Arris in or whatever, red Komodos or whatever they're doing. And a lot of that also depends on where the video's gonna go. If it's gonna be broadcast, you probably do want kind of some nice high-end cameras on it, especially these days of HETV and things. But if it's just going to be like on your Instagram or on your own YouTube channel, then you probably don't need that as expensive a camera, to be fair. In fact, I would say the majority, as in over 50% as opposed to 95%, but the majority of videos I shoot these days, I shoot on DSLRs. Because budgetary reasons for the client, I own lots of those, so they're not paying out higher fees on that. And when I say I shoot on DSLRs, they're high-end DSLRs and they've all been modded to shoot log, so they're video cameras rather than they obviously will take stills as well, but they're intended to shoot video and shoot video properly. So they'll be shooting in them C-Log because they're Canon. And they'll still have like Cine Prime lenses on, rather than kit lenses and things, and they can look so cinematic. It's absolutely crazy how far DSLR technology it's revolutionised the video industry. DSLRs, people who can shoot full frame, get that lovely blown out depth of field effect now for a really, really, really cheap price, basically.
Yeah.
But my lenses tend to be more expensive than the cameras. So, I do have a bit of a lens fetish.
Do you shoot? Is it a mixture of like location shoots and studio stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. Sometimes you'll get a video where it's both, some in the studio and some on location, but they tend to be one or the other. Okay. So the last one I shot, for instance, was literally in just the whole thing was shot in a black dark room with very dramatic lighting, and there's a beauty to that as well, because not only does it look dramatic, but everything is controllable. You know, the lights are controllable, the lenses are controllable, the cameras are controllable, the subjects are usually controllable to a certain extent. So that's kind of quite nice in a way. Whatever you sketch out on a storyboard is exactly what you're going to get out the end of it. So that's the benefit of shooting in a studio. And then, you know, shooting on location has its own beauty and its own troubles for the same thing, you know. So you can never control the weather or the light. And you kind of have to go with it a bit. But again, I like the challenge of that too. But they tend to be like one or the other. So yeah, I'm trying to think of the last few I've shot. Yeah, no, the one before was location. So yeah, I've done a completely studio one and then a completely location one, literally the last 2 videos. So
my first ever production assistant role was on it was a sort of music, wasn't a video, it was like promo for this like Michael Bublé tribute, but it was a black studio with lots of lights, and for some reason the director had put this massive like crane arm up in this black studio, and I was just like, I'm not really sure why.
What's that achieving?
I was just like, I was just setting up light stands and sitting around and waiting for something to do.
I love lighting stuff. Lighting stuff is so it's the best bits. You know, there's the sort of difference between a sort of DOP and a videographer is basically if you don't know that, it's like DOP is kind of like organised lights and lenses. Basically, they're quite a lot of the time they don't even touch a camera. They just kind of decree what's going to happen. So
that's a good point actually, because sometimes you see DOP, director of photography, and sometimes you'll see cinematographer or videographer. They're sort of the same but not the same. So.
I think DOP and cinematographer are kind of interchangeable, certainly across the pond.
Isn't the director of photographer there like in charge of everything you see
pretty
on
much
the camera?
On the screen? So you know, even the mise en scène to a certain extent, you know, in conjunction obviously with the set design and the director and stuff as well, but generally it's lights and lenses. Basically, this is how it's going to be lit, this is the lens we're going to use. That's their main brief, I'd say. And a videographer is basically just capturing what's happening in front of a camera. So they are 2 different things, or 3 different things.
And have you done much work on narrative based like short films or feature films or anything like that?
I haven't done a lot of film, and it's probably something I want to do more of. I think we've talked about this before as well, haven't we? So but it's I've dotted a few across my career. In fact, I met my wife on my first video shoot. She was the actress, I was the cameraman. And again, that was back in the late 90s. So that was a really weird film. I don't know if it's I need to look on YouTube to see if it still exists, because I don't think I ever saw it. But it was called Graven Image, and it was about a guy who got a tattoo which kind of took over his mind and made him do weird things.
Okay.
So everyone wants a haunted tattoo, you know, film about that. But that was a really, really good film shoot, and it's shot over about 2 or 3 weeks. It was a proper feature length thing, and I think I did week 1 and week 3, I think, as camera. So something like that. But it was the first film I'd worked on, and it was really, really enjoyable. I'm desperately trying to think what we shot it on. I think that might have been pneumatic. I can't remember. Can't remember the cameras now. But yeah.
Is there any projects you've got coming up that you're excited about, that you're thinking about, like how are you going to shoot something that maybe is going to challenge you?
What have I got coming up this year? Later in the year, we've got... I can't really talk about those.
Okay.
But yes, I've got a couple of potentially nice, big, juicy music videos to do. But I think the main one on the horizon at the moment is the 80s Obsession one that I mentioned earlier. That's the one I'm kind of concentrating on at the moment. That will be a full narrative, full crew, locations kind of thing. So I've got quite a lot of work to do. That's the nice thing about these songs, where someone just goes out and sings in the woods. You don't really have to think about it. But this one is going to take a bit of getting into and kind of working out to do. So that's the one I'm concentrating on at the moment.
But you said earlier you get bored easily, so you're always looking to sort of challenge yourself with
absolutely
shooting it a different way, or approaching it differently.
Challenge is always good. It's like the best bit about my job is every day is different. As you mentioned earlier, I do photography as well as being a musician as well. So it's not only a different shoot every day, it could be a different thing I'm doing every day. And that's what stops me getting bored. I really, really love that kind of variety of life, I suppose. I'd find it very, very hard now to go back to a sort of 9 to 5 in an office.
Yeah.
It's much more fun doing this kind of thing. And again, I'm digressing from an original question, which was... what did you ask?
Just like the challenge.
Just the challenge, of doing things. Yeah. So I think every shoot I'll try and do something I've not done before, or something I have done before but in a different way, because it's not only keeps me fresh and gives me a challenge to kind of get over, but it gives something to that music video. And when you find something to put in a music video that's not been done before, so no one else has done it, then that's even better. So I kind of quite like that kind of stuff. And sometimes that could be in the shoot, and sometimes that can be in the edit. You stick some kind of After Effects CGI or something in there, just for almost little Easter eggs for people to kind of see and spot and stuff like that. I like that and that kind of stuff.
Do you find you're still learning how to do things new every time?
Absolutely. Yeah, every day is a school day. You can always learn something new, and you can always learn something from someone you don't expect to learn something from. I've learned things from like makeup artists on shoot. Just offhand comments is like, oh yeah, the problem with this is like when they do this kind of lighting, it goes a bit green. It's just stuff like that. It's like, you wouldn't know that stuff unless a makeup artist told you that sort of thing. You might notice it in an edit if you're the one editing it as well. But absolutely. We run a little young filmmakers group here at City Eye, and there's like sort of 12 to 18-year-olds, and I learned stuff from them as well. It's like not just what's trending on TikTok, but it can be stuff like that. It's kind of, there's these transitions have come out on this app and all this kind of stuff. Oh, I really like that, and I'll go off and work out how to do something similar with my kit.
Yeah, I like things like when TikTok, or before that, like Vine or something come out, because without knowing it, young people are learning how to edit or how to shoot things, or how to tell a story. And like I think that's so good. I wish I could edit on TikTok the way that some of them do. I'm not very good at TikTok. I'll watch things and I'll think, how have they done that in the app? Because if I was going to do it, I would put it into Premiere Pro, and I would do this, and then I'd export it. But some of them are doing it in the app.
I've tried.
Yeah.
In fairness, I have tried, but I'm like, oh no, I know how to do this in another program. So with TikToks, I tend to do them, like you say, in Premiere, and then put them back into TikTok and put the captions on and the sounds. Then
I do appreciate the accounts that also show you, this is how I made this TikTok.
Absolutely. But some of I love the transition trend that was going around when everyone's like trying to make the best transition. It's like some of those were so inventive. Yeah. And actually, I have used some of those on music videos before now. Some of those transitions that I've learned from seeing like a teenager's TikTok.
Wow.
So every day's a school day.
Every day's a school day. Well, that would be actually a good segue into if anyone's listening is thinking about becoming a director of photography or shooting music videos. Do you have any advice of sort of where to start?
Absolutely. Well, as we mentioned already, I fell into it in quite a weird way, and a lot of happy accidents put me where I am today. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend going the route I did. But the bottom line is just, if you want to do it, go out there and do it. So if it's shooting music videos, go out there and shoot them on an iPhone, and then eventually people will start giving you a bit of money to do that, and then you can buy a better camera and things, and eventually you will get noticed, you will get picked up by someone. So that's a perfectly valid route into doing it. If you want to go straight into the sort of DOPing, things like that, there's obviously some great university courses these days. I think back when I was sort of teaching university, Ravensbourne was the one to go for, but there's so many now. There's one right here in Southampton, well, a couple right here in Southampton. Solent Uni does some amazing courses. And again, I worked there very briefly. Trying to think when that was, about early 2000s. It was called Southampton Institute in those days. But even today, there's so many much more courses and the department and the studios are just absolutely fantastic. But also the studios themselves do offer a lot of opportunities. So Pinewood and Shepperton and things, get on their websites, look what courses they're doing. There's paid courses, but there's also apprenticeships and things. Literally had an email last week about one from Pinewood, apprenticeship round coming up. So that's a real quick fast track into film, is get yourself on one of those. It's just like applying for a college course. Just write the best application you can, and they might have 4 or 5 spaces, and hopefully you'll get one.
I didn't do like uni or film school or anything, but I've had this conversation many times with people when they're umming whether to do it. And obviously if you're not the type of person that's going to do well in the sort of uni environment, then obviously that's not for you. But one thing that they do have for film people is just the access to kit and things like that. That if
that's invaluable. Yeah, totally.
That's something I wish I have been able to.
Yeah, if you don't uni yourself, befriend a uni media student.
Exactly,
for sure.
Through CCI work, I've been able to access kit in various ways as well. But
absolutely. But that's a really valid point. You don't have to go to university. In fact, I used to get into trouble quite a lot because I taught at sixth form for quite a while, and I used to actually tell my really good students, don't go to uni, because if you certain things. If you want to do in the sort of film industry, then it probably is worth going to uni for. But if you kind of want to be behind a camera or even editor or anything, you don't have to go to university to do that. You literally just call production companies, just go and volunteer, go and shadow, go and work experience, go and intern and stuff like that. It feels like quite a closed industry sometimes, and people often describe it as a very nepotistic industry, and it is, but not in a bad way. And I really don't know how to describe this, but it's one of those things like if you're crewing up a shoot, you're going to use crew that because not because of your mates, but if I need a second camera, I always use my friend Matt, because I know that if I give Matt a camera, he's going to come back with the same shot I would have taken. We just kind of know each other like that. So that's why it's nepotistic. It's because you kind of trust people to bring back what you need. So it's not in a jobs for the boys kind of way. It's the kind of like, this is a one-shot opportunity. It has to be right, and I can't do it, so can you do it? It's more like that. So if you get in on the ground level, and people talk about going and carrying tripods and making coffee and stuff, but it works. So just go and spend a few weeks in a production company, go on a couple of shoots, call TV companies, call studios and things like that. It's a perfectly valid route in. As soon as people know you and can trust you, then they might give you a camera on the next shoot, and then you'll be doing the behind the scenes or something, and they're this is great, I'll come and do our next shoot. And it works time after time after time. It's that's quite a fast track in. You don't need a university degree or a qualification or anything. If you can do it, you can do it. It's perfectly valid.
I did that before with a feature film where I came in as the production assistant, and on the first day they were like, we don't have anyone to hold our boom, and I was like, well, I can hold a boom, I've done that. And then just from getting to know the crew, they told them I did some first AD stuff for short films, and then a couple of weeks later the first AD pulled out.
There you go. That's how exactly how I got my break in TV, because someone he had a motorbike accident, bless him. He was fine, he just broke an ankle or something, but he couldn't make the shoot, so I stood in, got a job. So and be nice, be kind, be nice to everyone, because it's it's a £4 billion industry, isn't it? I think the film industry, but it's actually a small industry. You never tread on anyone. Be kind, be nice to everyone, because you never know when you're going to come across that person again. It happened to me last week, it was a couple of weeks ago, the City Eye Network evening, was a guy came along to that who I used to work with in TV 23 years ago, and I haven't seen him since. So 23 years later, this guy walks through the door. He's still teaching in the industry, and they're still around. So you never know. Be nice to everyone.
Get networking. Be nice to everyone.
Everyone knows everyone else.
And just get out there and shoot something. Would you suggest maybe approaching a local band and being like, do you guys want a music video? Yeah,
absolutely. I think most of these things kind of start off with it's people isn't it? It's like, I'm really into this video kind of stuff, and my mate's in a band sort of thing, and they'll probably ask you if you mind shooting something. But there's definitely easy ways to get out there. You know, you can approach venues as well, just get them to, you know, leave cards in their foyer, or the green room is the best place for those kind of things, where the bands are hanging out while they're waiting for sound checks and things. But yeah, just mention them on, you know, on social media as well. I've picked up quite a lot of work from, I'll go and shoot a band. I'm talking like still photography now. I'll be booked to go and shoot a band, and while I'm there, I'll shoot the support band as well, just because I'm there, and it's kind of a good test for me to make sure I'm happy with the lights and all that kind of stuff. And I will always send them those photos, you know, because what am I going to do with them? You know, it's just a kind thing. Here's some free photos. I was at the gig shooting the other band, but I thought you guys might like these, you know, 15 photos. And I've actually picked up so much work from that, whether it's those bands themselves then asking me to come and do a shoot with them, or whether it's people they know who've seen those shots or seen them on social media and go, oh, who took those photos or whatever. It really works. Just be kind, be nice.
Yeah. But I was just thinking, is there anything that you haven't worked on yet that you'd quite like to do, or
God.
like?
I don't know. It's like music videos is my absolute passion. As you say, I'm a musician as well, and a significant part of my income comes from music. But I'm a video geek as well. So music videos is kind of my pinnacle. I used to do big ones back in the day, and they were a lot of fun, but they also have their own inherent problems. I kind of like being in charge of them myself. That sounds so arrogant, doesn't it?
So the bigger ones you've probably got.
Yeah, you've got crew, you've got people calling the shots, and you might not necessarily agree with what they're doing. You know, it's like that kind of thing. So, you know, I'm not saying I don't like them because of that. They're great, but I kind of quite like being in charge of my own. I think what I'm missing at the moment, it is a bit of a boring answer, is like the location, as in the destination music videos. I used to shoot a lot of music videos abroad, and without getting political, since the whole referendum Brexit thing, that doesn't really happen much these days. I think I've got one destination video booked in this year, which will be a really good one, admittedly. But yeah, there was one where we were going to shoot it, I can't remember where, but it's something like M25 corridor. It's somewhere near London, and the producer actually found out it would be cheaper to shoot in Sardinia, literally, because of the hotels, locations, even the transport. I think it was £105 on the train for me to get to the shoot, and it was 30 quid on EasyJet to go to Sardinia. You know, it was that kind of thing. So we ended up going to Sardinia for 4 days to shoot a music video, and it was cheaper than 2-day shoot in London. So that doesn't really, it's not really happening at the moment. So more of those, more sun-kissed destination music videos, please. Yeah, and yeah, you know, big names is good and everything, but I quite like the new artists, the undiscovered ones too.
If you were to make a music video sort of inspired or like a homage to your favourite film or TV show or something, what would you pick?
Well, funnily enough, oh God, I told you I'm really boring at these things, but the Obsession one that I've mentioned earlier in the podcast, the 80s one, is going to be very Stranger Things meets Rear Window. Oh, what was that? Do you know, I think there was a film called Obsession in the 80s about a stalker or something very similar. Sorry, I really digressed, and I shouldn't have gone on to this point because I can't remember the name of the film.
Well, you keep saying,
I can't remember the name of the actor.
You keep
either.
saying Obsession 80s. I keep thinking of
Calvin Klein.
I wear my sunglasses. That song. That's. I think they use that in Stranger Things. I think that's probably where I know that song.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got that on vinyl.
Yeah, but that video is someone following someone, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, that is going to be very Stranger Things, just because that nostalgia is just so big at the moment, and you know, the band I'm in is a very 80s synth poppy band anyway, so 80s is kind of my jam anyway. Luckily you can't see the Hawaiian shirt I'm wearing at home on audio. But
I'll take a photo.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's fair to say I'm a fan of the 80s, so I'm really looking forward to that one, and I want to make it as 80s-tastic as possible. So again, down to using the camera, using the techniques, using the crash zooms, you know, that they loved in the 80s. You'd never see a crash zoom these days.
I'd love to do like an alien-inspired video.
God, that would be so good, wouldn't it? Yeah, what other films would be like really good to kind of music video-fi?
That's a good question.
That's one for another time to mull over, I think. Yeah, I'm going to have to think about that. Just an homage.
Yeah, probably lots of sci-fi films, just because you can, like, the whole
they
thing.
Have the best
the
locations,
set, the
don't
costumes,
they?
the lighting.
Yeah, the more out there you can go, the better, I think. Yeah, definitely.
Do you have any goals for yourself, or just something that you'd like to do? Like we were talking earlier about, like maybe shooting on film or anything like that.
Yeah, okay. I'm kind of. Oh no! I told you I'm really quite a boring person. I'm quite unambitious. That sounds really dreadful, but I'm not really. I've never been about the kind of the fame, the money, that kind of thing. All over what it's like to enjoy myself, have fun, but have enough money not to kind of be worrying about money, if that makes kind of sense. So my goals are really quite limited like that, I suppose. But the main thing is, it's like I said, I enjoy what I do. And when you enjoy what you do, it's not work anymore. I had my first gig yesterday for a while, like this year, sort of live music gig. And it was just the crowd was going mad. Everyone was bouncing up and down. You get that little hero worship at the end of it, wishing we all secretly love a bit of that, don't we? And then someone gives you money as well. So it's like that's my goal, really. It's just to enjoy what I'm doing and get paid for it. But on a completely camera geek technical level, I really want an RE35. That's my goal. That's a really boring geeky one.
That's the dream camera.
That's the dream camera at the moment. They invited me up to play with it when they released it, which was great. So I went up to their augmented reality stage, up in London, where they did the virtual. Absolutely fantastic place. And I got to play with this brand new RE35mm camera, and it's I think a kit of one of those is north of £100,000, so they're not a cheap camera. But I want one of those. I actually haven't hired one yet for a shoot. I haven't had a shoot that big come in since they released it. We shot with Arri Minis and Alexa and things before now, but I want to do a shoot on an RE35, but I also want to own that RE35. That's the geekiest goal that anyone's
you put that in the
ever
contract.
Said. That's going to be you don't have to pay me, but just let me keep the camera.
Keep the camera.
As if they'd be paying me that much anyway.
One of my short films was shot on a Arri Mini, but that was because the cinematographer was a student at university, and that's what they had access to. And I was like, great, sounds good.
Absolutely. Well, do you know, the older ones of those are really not that expensive now.
Really?
And they still stand up. As long as they come with a license and all that kind of stuff.
The biggest issue I found, and I didn't know it until afterwards, was that the camera wasn't recording sound.
Okay.
So I had to sync the sound and the image manually myself.
Well, that's again going back to the analog discussion we were having earlier. The same thing there. The cameras didn't record sound in those days, but they were tape based, as were I think we used to use Nagra audio recorders, crystal locked recorders, but they were still tape. And tape obviously stretches to the extent where it's probably about 12 seconds an hour out of sync. By the time you get an hour into a clip, the sound will be 12 seconds out, and you had to fix that somehow analogly. You couldn't just do a little time stretch or something like you can on Premiere these days. So
I was talking about that
happy days
on the first episode of the podcast with Ben Grace, who obviously shoots on film. So obviously the film is shooting faster than the sound is recording.
Absolutely. There's a fun times. Definite fun times. I once to digress onto another story. We've got time, haven't we? I once did a music video. So it was a gig shoot. So it was a reasonably big singer. I'm not going to name them, but they share a musical director with Kylie. So they had they were quite a big act, and they had a gig in London and they wanted to release it as a DVD. And even though it was DVD, it wasn't actually that long ago. So DVD, sure, do people still have DVDs? It was only about 5 years ago. But released it on DVD anyway. And they did this gig. So I went and shot it, multi-camera thing. I think we had 6 or 7 cameras dotted around this auditorium. Looked wonderful, all came back and everything. But the musical director, being the very high level musical director he wasn't happy with her vocals on the night and made her re-record them. So they had the video, they had the stuff I'd shot, but he didn't take it with them when he took, I nearly said her name, I really shouldn't say her name. When they took them back into the studio to re-record it, ADR or whatever, you'd watch the video and you'd sync up your vocals. But he didn't, he just made her re-record these tracks and then sent me this re-recorded audio to put on a video that had already been made and filmed and edited and somehow sync up. Wow. And there was points in that where her mouth was closed when she was still singing, or vice versa, because the audio she'd sung it completely differently. Although they'd kept to a click track on the night, luckily, so the song was the same length and the music was perfect, but the vocals were completely different. And I think there were 6 songs that ended up on this DVD, and I think there was somewhere in the region of 2,630 speed edits I had to do in the edit to make her lips match the sounds that were actually coming out. And I never want to do that.
No.
So musical directors, if you ever do that, it's absolutely fine. But ADR it.
Make sure they're watching it.
So they can see what they did on the night.
I won't make that mistake again on my film. I think because just the cameras I'd used before, they recorded sound, so I knew I would have that, and then I didn't think to ask the cinematographer, and I was more than happy for her.
It is possible, you just need an adult.
I was more than happy for her to use whatever camera she wanted to use, because I knew then she'd get the most out of it. And it was only when I was watching the footage back, I was like, and then I asked her, and she was like, "Oh, I don't know. I usually just send it to my sound guy." And I was like, "Okay, great." So fortunately, we had clapperboards in the shot, so
at least you had something.
Yes, and I synced it all before I sent it to the editor, because
that's one of the nice things about doing music videos. Actually, you don't often have to sync, live sound. So it's just stick it on afterwards. Although when you get the ones when they're walking about, so they're listening to playback on AirPods or something hidden in their ear. That can always be a bit of a nightmare because the camera can't hear what they're hearing.
Okay,
so my next, I'm shooting a music video tomorrow where I'm doing that. So wish me luck with syncing that one up.
Good luck. So we need to start wrapping up before Aaron starts banging the door down and kicking us out. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you wanted to go over?
I don't know.
Maybe we can come back and do some other episodes about
all
the other things that you
editing
do.
Or something. Yeah, absolutely. Colour science. Oh God, don't get me started on colour science. Oh dear, I could talk about that for quite a while. Bayer matrices, my specialist subject on Mastermind.
A special episode of the podcast.
Absolutely. If you want a really geeky one, I'll talk about colour science and send everyone to sleep and unsubscribe. No, thank you for having me. I really appreciate you asking
Thank you so much.
And I apologise. I'm quite a boring person.
You're not a boring person. Thank you so much for being here.
No worries.
Here we are again at the end of another episode of the Blue Moggy Podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and a huge thank you for coming back after our unscheduled pause in the release of the episodes. I really hope you enjoyed that conversation for Glen. If you have any questions for Glen about this episode, or you just want to find out more about Glen and see what Glen's up to, you can find Glen on Instagram at Jevon99, that's Jevon 99, or on Facebook at Glen Jevon Photography and Video. We may get Glen back on a future episode to talk about some of the other many things that Glen can do. So if you'd like to hear that, let me know. In the next episode, which has already been recorded, I'm really happy to bring you guys the conversation between me and Abby Hills. Abby is a talent agent. She started her own company, the Daisy Hills Company. It's a talent agency for on-screen and on stage, so screen and stage actors, as well as... So Abby and I talked about how she got into film and working within talent agency, why and how she started her own agency, We also talked about her work as an access coordinator on television projects, so working with the productions to make sure that they're accessible and inclusive and supportive of anyone who's working on that production who has a disability or additional needs. And that's something that Abby's quite passionate about herself as a person with disability. It was a great conversation, and one that was a long time coming. Managed to catch Abby in between Manchester and London and France, and she came to Southampton to record this episode. So yeah, I'm very happy that will be coming out to your ears in a couple of weeks. So make sure you're subscribing, following, liking this episode wherever you're listening to it, so you can get the notification of when that episode with Abby comes out. As I said at the beginning of the episode, if there's if you have any requests for a particular job or department or individual you want featured on the podcast, please let me know so I can try and prioritize those for you guys. And if you have any other questions or comments or suggestions, please reach out to me via Blue Moggy Media. That's Blue Moggy Media on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter. Finally, thank you guys again so much for coming back, and you'll hear from me and Abby Hills in 2 weeks' time with a new episode. And that's a wrap.